Ladies and gentlemen, the title of my talk is The Position Matters, Handicaps of Biotagging in Wild Living Northern Bald Ibises. It's about this beautiful bird species. It's endangered, and we are on the way to reintroduce a migratory population in Europe. The main method is the human-led migration, where we train hand-raised birds to follow the microlights, and with the microlights we lead them from breeding sites north of the Alps to a wintering site in southern Tuscany. The population is growing. End of 2021, we expect almost 200 birds in the wild. I will tell you about two topics related to this reintroduction. First, shortly about an ongoing study, effects of shape and positioning of biologging devices on aerodynamics and flight performance. We used a range of different biologging devices in the past, and once this type, the prototype of a small and light device fixed on the upper back of the birds, and surprisingly, we observed during the training flights that the birds exhausted quite fast when carrying this device compared to birds without device. And when you look on this slow-mo of a bird flying made out of the microlight, you see all along the back feathers permanently flapping. This indicates quite a significant turbulent flow disturbance, which in turn causes higher aerodynamic costs, and is probably the reason for the fast exhaustion of these birds. In comparison, we once also used a quite big, not heavy, but big aerodynamically shaped device fixed on the lower back. In this case, we found no differences in the flight performance. And when you look on the slow-mo, this device causes almost no turbulences on the back. So it indicates a laminar flux. We have since 2 years our own wind tunnel, which was built in cooperation with the University of Applied Science. And there we have the conditions to experimentally work on this aerodynamic aspects. I hope to tell you more about that in a later conference. I come to the second and the main topic. Biologging is suspected to cause corneal opacity in two populations of wild living Northern Bald Ibises. It's a quite unexpected and irregular story published in Avian Research. In 2016, we observed during a screening one bird which had a slight clouding in one of the eyes. We had no idea what was the reason, but we were sensibilized and looked more on the condition of the eyes during the monitoring and during the consecutive screening. And in 2017, during the screening, we found a total of 18 birds with such symptoms, from slight clouding to completely destroyed eyeballs where a light was lost. Experts throughout Europe had not at all an idea about the reason and cause of these symptoms, particularly because it was in all the cases unilateral, only one eye was affected. In these times, all birds were equipped with GPS devices, but mainly battery-loaded devices on the lower back. Only a few birds, but increasing number of birds, carried solar-powered devices which were fixed on the upper back via wing loop, because there's more sun exposure. Daniela, our field manager, observed an unexpected relationship. Only birds with solar-powered devices showed these symptoms. Indeed, in 2017, about 70% of all the birds with solar-powered devices on the upper back had such symptoms, while the majority of birds which carry battery-loaded devices had it not at all. Not one single bird showed these symptoms. There is one behavior which is characteristic to bald ibises, but also other species, which relates biologging to these symptoms, and that's the roosting behavior. It brings one eye in very close distance to the device. Being aware of that, we started to remove the devices from this upper back position and placed it via leg loop harness on the lower back. This brings the device in distance to the eyes when the bird is roosting, and the effect was very obvious. The population was growing and an increasing number were equipped with solar-powered devices, but the number of new cases of opacity decreased, and since 2020 we have no new case. So there is a strong evidence for a causal relationship between this effect and the devices fixed on the upper back. We know that if the device remains, the symptoms progress, and with secondary effects, they can lead to complete blindness and ultimately to death of the individual. While on the other side, if the device is removed from this position, the eye regenerates quickly, unless the disease has progressed too far and is therefore irreversible. And we had not one single case of opacity when the device was fixed via leg loop harness on the lower back. Some questions arise. One is, could this be a phenomenon limited to this population? We know that it's not the case because identical symptoms were found in a sedentary population in Spain. Under the same conditions, they have the same symptoms, and the birds also recovered when they removed the devices. But could it be a species-specific effect limited to Northern Bald Ibises? We have to say that so far there is no evidence in other species, but there is no valid argument for this assumption. Rather, detection is difficult under most conditions where biologging is applied, and therefore the symptoms were not detected so far. And I come at the end to the causal relationships. We have no experimental proof, but we have two main hypotheses on this. The most parsimonious explanation seems that persistent slight mechanical irritation of the cornea causes these effects. However, in a statement from Alexandra Skope of the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna, the results of different studies of different institutions are summarized, and she clearly states that there is no evidence of external mechanical causes, nor were any infectious pathogens detectable. The second hypothesis, influence of electromagnetic radiation on the cornea and lens tissue caused by the integrated GSM module, may be responsible. This seems like a far-fetched hypothesis, and colleagues even think it is unserious and rather a gimmickry to state this hypothesis. However, it's the most substantial hypothesis. And I mention only one study. It's from colleagues Dovrat et al. 2005. They exposed A lenses on the one hand side to slightly increased temperature, on the other hand side to microwave, the local microwave radiation. In both cases, they found a vacuolation in the lens. And when I come back to the report of Alexandra Skope, they found that in heavily destroyed eyes, also the lenses were affected. And she writes, in the pathohistological examination, the lens substance appears regularly vacuolated. So this is clear parallels to the study of Dovrat et al. Furthermore, Dovrat et al. States that whatever the characteristic of the mechanism is, it ought to be local, and the lens usually recovers after exposure. And this has also very clear parallels to what we observed in the Northern Bald Ibises. In any case, further experimental studies are required. However, this goes beyond our capacities as a conservation project. But we are open for any kind of cooperation and provide our data to anybody interested. Open-minded research in this context seems us very much in the interest of the biological community in general. So I thank you for your attention and interest. Please don't hesitate to get in contact with us.